Yeah, shall I start? Okay, it was not all a great big plan from the start at all, of course. And it really is about how we got together and what we discovered. So we met when we were teenagers. And I was still at school, Nicky just left school. And we ended up in next door holiday cottages. He was with his family, I was with a friend's family. And we were there for 2 weeks. And I fell madly in love.
And
but I
so did I.
Yeah, but we didn't know how the other one felt until literally 2 days before I was about to leave and go home. And then we realized the feelings were mutual. And so we actually then got together and we started going out. But at that stage, we were not Christians. And so we kind of just did it our way. We did it, the way that we saw our contemporaries, our peers, the culture doing relationships. And then 2 years later, at uni, there was a mission and a man who came to speak for a week. And it was just at the end of that mission. Nicky heard all the talks, I only heard 2. And that was when really we met Jesus, and we, both of us realized Jesus loved us, Jesus died for us, Jesus rose again in order to set us free. And we gave our lives to Jesus. And that really changed everything. It changed it for us to come into a personal relationship with Jesus. And it changed everything in our own relationship, because we started to realize that God's ways of loving were just better than our ways and the ways we'd been doing life, really. And that had a big impact. And so it was about 2.5 years between then, when we came to faith, and then before we got married. And we learned a lot of things. Sometimes it was very challenging, but it was good. We knew it was good, going in the right direction. And I think then when we got married, suddenly we realized lots of people were coming to ask us questions about relationships. And we just had this passion in our heart to share with them what God had taught us and was continuing to teach us. As we set out on marriage, there was lots of practical stuff that we were learning and had to learn. And that's where we just felt God, we just wanted to pass that on, and that's how we got into doing what we're doing.
And then when we joined our church in London, where we were pastors for 37 years, we started right at the beginning doing the pre-marriage course with engaged couples who wanted to explore marriage, and we saw the difference that it made, passing on, as Sila said, these things that we'd learned. And then with the marriage course for couples who'd been married any length of time, again, we saw the impact, the difference. We could see them working through stuff, getting closer. And then they talked to their friends about it. And many of their friends were not churchgoers. And they came on these courses, and we saw, gosh, they're really enjoying it. And we realized these principles for loving, these principles for relationship really are universal. And I think that's why these courses now have spread around the world. God knows the best ways for us to relate to each other. And so it's been exciting passing these things on and seeing the impact.
Amazing. I just wondered, you guys have said a little bit there about marriage, but for lots of us, we will have friends, we might know people in our family who might be like, why even bother with marriage like nowadays? Why not just live together? Why not buy a house or have a child? It's so expensive to get married, all that sort of thing. What do you think it is about marriage that is so important?
Well, if you read the Bible, marriage is the very first relationship that is there, and it's the most intimate relationship that is possible between two people. That's how it's described in Genesis chapter 2. For this reason, a man will leave his mother and father, be joined to his wife, and the two will become one. So right from the beginning, this is God's design, that marriage is foundational for society and foundational for family life. And and I know it doesn't always work out like this, but God's design is that every child should be born into a home where there's a relationship of love, committed love between his or her mother and father. And then that every child should grow up watching this. And of course, it's at a subconscious level, but children learn through what they experience. They experience, of course, the love of their mother and father for them, but they also learn through seeing what a committed relationship looks like. And of course, not a perfect relationship, and children need to learn that, you know, when you mess up, you can apologize, you can say sorry, you can forgive, you can get back together. So children are learning vital things. Now, having said all that, we know many single parents doing a fantastic job bringing up children on their own. It's a lot harder bringing up a child on your own than in a marriage. And we know the children of many single parents who live fantastic lives, fulfilled lives. But if you look at the research, on average, children do best when they're brought up within a loving, healthy marriage between their parents. And we need to talk about this because, as you said, Laura, our culture is sort of dismissing marriage in many ways as saying, you know, it's pretty irrelevant.
And I think what we know is that a child growing up needs, in order to thrive and to flourish and to develop in a healthy way, they need a place that is safe. And it's incredible now. I mean, the research that's been done in the last even 20 years around neuroscience and brain research of healthy developing brains shows that the biggest need for a child in the third trimester in the womb, as well as in the first 18 months is critical, and then the first 5 years is also critical, is safety. And that, of course, is what is happening between that child's mother and father. Now, please hear us. We do not mean a marriage is a perfect marriage. There are no perfect marriages. As Nicky's already said, we get things wrong, we hurt each other. But it means a place of commitment. And you know, the very fact that marriage is designed as a place where we've made a commitment to be faithful, to be to love one another through the ups and the downs, through the difficulties, through sickness and in health, that creates this place of safety and security for a child. And then a child can thrive. Then they feel a sense of significance, and I matter, I am valued for who I am, and their self-esteem is strong. And that is the incredible bedrock and foundation of what a child needs as they grow up. And I have to say, the breakdown of marriage is a crisis. And it's not only a crisis in our country, it is a global crisis, the breakdown of marriage. There are many reasons we have no time to go into, but we as Christians, of all people, are the ones who can champion marriage. We know God says honor marriage, and we need to champion marriage, whether we are married or not married, because it is absolutely critical to the health of our society.
Can I just say one more thing? Sorry, I know you've got some other questions for us, but one other thing about marriage, I think that many people miss. They think, we'll just live together and see how it goes. But you don't build the most intimate of relationships without that commitment. And we sung that, there was a line in a fantastic worship here. Oh my goodness, I loved it. And there was a line in one of the songs to God, we can show you our weaknesses. And I thought, yes, we can. That is because God is faithful. God is committed to us. So we can be completely vulnerable with God. And that is a clue to why the commitment of marriage means you build real trust. If you don't know whether the person's going to hang around, you're not really going to reveal all of yourself. You're not going to reveal your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses. But it's within the commitment of marriage. I can be myself with Sila. I can tell her, I know that, you know, with differences, with arguments, with me revealing myself, she's not going to walk away. And that is what builds the most intimate of relationships.
So good. Now, there'll be people here who are married, single, widowed, divorced, all sorts. What can you tell us about what the Bible has about relationships in general, not just marriage, that you think is healthy for all relationships?
Can we look at a passage?
We can.
There's one passage, sorry, I don't want to talk more than Sila, but there's a passage in Paul's letter to the Colossians, which, if you've been at a wedding in a church, there's a high chance this would have been the passage that was read. But this passage, it is about all relationships, what Christian relationships look like. And Sila's going to read it, and then we just want to say one or two things about it.
So it's Colossians chapter 3, starting at verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him.
And you know, I would encourage everybody here, sometime through this week, look at that passage again, Colossians 3, 12 to 17, and read through it carefully, word by word, phrase by phrase. Pray about it. Think about what that means, because it's all how our relationship with God through Jesus affects the way that we relate to each other. And if we could have just the beginning of that, Colossians 3, verse 12, you see it starts, therefore as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. And then Paul goes on to say how we are to relate to each other. But it starts with knowing that we are loved by God. It is we receive his love. We know in his love we can be confident, secure, forgiven, all of these wonderful things that we've been singing about this evening. And it's out of that knowledge that we're able to reach out in love to others. And just a tiny bit further on, Paul uses those three words where he says, put on love. And so often we think of love just as about a feeling. I feel in love with this person, or I love that person for whatever reason. But actually, Paul talks about love as a choice, something that we do deliberately as we got dressed this morning. And I think that was when Sila talked earlier about the difference for us in becoming Christians in our relationship. I think that this is a massive part of it. We both suddenly realized it's not just about the love that we feel from each other. It's how can we love each other better? And one of those things Paul says is clothe yourself with kindness. Kindness means recognizing someone else's need, putting yourself out to meet that need. So love is about being other-oriented rather than just what I feel in myself.
Yeah, and can I just say at this point, because I know there are quite a lot of people here who are not married, that, excuse me, a lot of people often say to us, well, what would be your number one thing to put on a list if you're looking for a marriage partner? And without question, I would say that characteristic, kindness. It's an amazing quality in a marriage relationship. Somebody who is kind, because as Nicky said, it is other-oriented. And what's the thing you always say about watch how somebody relates with...
Yeah, if you're going out with someone, watch how they relate to their mother. That's a pretty good test. Do they show kindness? Or it could be somebody else.
I'm going to put you on the spot. We haven't planned this question at all. But tell me, Sila, the last kind thing that Nicky did for you that kind of encapsulates kindness.
Oh gosh, he got up very early this morning and brought me a cup of tea.
Come on.
Oh, and he pretty much does that every morning.
Oh.
I am bad in the morning, and he is so kind because, he's not necessarily wanting to get up that early and make me a cup of tea.
And Nicky, same question. Last kind thing Sila did for you that kind of encapsulates
Well, there are quite a lot, but Sila does most of the cooking in our marriage. And when she during lockdown, she started to make sourdough bread. She doesn't eat very much bread herself. She makes it for me. And every time I have a slice of this bread, I think, this is amazing. I love it.
That's beautiful, guys.
I feel loved. That's the end of the
Absolutely.
day.
Nothing better than bread. On a slightly different tack, for all of us, whether we're, well, I'm married, but whether we're married or we're dating or we're single, all of us are in relationships with other people, right? Like we have our friends, we have our family, we might have a partner. But what about conflict in those relationships? Do you guys have any good advice for like how to deal with it well, how to do it well with different people?
Yeah, I mean, conflict, can I say that, conflict is inevitable in relationships. And I mean, I think we're fed, and particularly about romantic relationships, but even friendships and everything, we're fed a Hollywood lie that if a person is right for you, you won't have any conflict. It'll all be, walking off into the sunset and you'll know they're your soulmate and you won't ever have any conflict. That is a lie. Because actually, conflict is inevitable. We are different. We are brought up in different ways. We have different personalities and all sorts of things. And but it's how we handle that conflict, because actually there are ways to resolve conflict when we have conflict. And either conflict becomes a thing that pushes us apart in a relationship. It always will. If you allow conflict to take control, it will push you apart. But where we can do the opposite and actually communicate about what it is that has caused the conflict, identify what it is that's caused the conflict, and then work through understanding each other better, that is a massive thing.
And I remember reading a book by a sort of relationship expert from the States called Danny Silk, and there was one little phrase in it that really struck me. He said, understanding in relationships is more important than agreement. And I thought about that a lot, and I realized how true it is, that all of us, what we want is to be understood. The other person may not agree with our opinion, but we want them to understand us. And the trouble in conflict is we're usually very keen that the other person understands our point of view, but we're not quite so keen to understand theirs. And when we do what Sila says, which is listening to them, seeking to understand them, get inside what they think, that draws us closer together. Actually, the very conflict can cause the relationship to grow. And when people feel understood, I think they're much more ready to compromise.
Yeah. And I grew up in a family, I mean, my parents were married for 50-something years, and they adored each other, but they were not good at resolving conflict. And the model of conflict in my home.
Quite a lot of door slamming.
A lot of door slamming and moods and that kind of stuff. So I came into
Sila's father could go into a mood for 48 hours. You tipped her around. I'd never seen this. I didn't know what to do.
Anyway, I came into marriage not really having a good model of how to resolve conflict. I had to learn it. And, one of the things at the heart of resolving conflict is identifying what it is that has upset you. And then being prepared to say sorry, whoever has hurt the other, and to forgive. And I had to learn about that. We had to learn about that in the early years of our marriage. And actually, it was about a year.
Can I just tell the background, and you pick up with the story? I don't know.
Don't be too long. We haven't got all night.
Okay. We'd been married, I don't know, a few months, and I had done something or said something that seriously upset Sila. But I had no idea what I'd done. And Sila went into a mood, a bit like her father. Actually, I ought to say I had a great relationship with her father. I loved her father. But he did go into moods. And Sila just did exactly what she'd observed growing up. And I remember this went on for about, 24 hours. And
what it did was exactly what I said. It pushed us apart. Because you stopped communicating. And we were sort of grunting at each other. And I was filled with resentment and self-pity. And that is not a good mix.
And eventually, after about 24 hours, suddenly Sila told me what it was that I had done that upset her, what I'd said actually that upset her. And when I heard, then I could say, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry, something like that. I didn't mean to. I'll try not to do that again. And then?
And then I knew for the first time I actually had to forgive Nicky. And you know, forgiveness, like Nicky was talking earlier about love, forgiveness is not just feelings, because when we've been hurt and upset, we don't feel like forgiving. We really don't. We feel like being grumpy or getting revenge or making sure the other one feels sort of like the same as we feel. And actually, we have to choose to forgive. And I remember that incident so clearly. I almost, through gritted teeth, which I'm not very proud of, I'm not at all proud of, through gritted teeth, I kind of said out loud to Nicky, I forgive you. And you know, it was extraordinary. The thing that happened was I realized that released, in that choosing to forgive, I let go of my self-pity and my resentment that I was holding on to. And I think a very good way of describing forgiveness is it's a letting go. You're not harboring it inside, which will damage your relationship. And this is true whether it's a marriage relationship, whether it's with another family member, whether it is with a friendship or a colleague at work. We have to not harbor that self-pity, that hurt. We have to let it go.
Now, if you're new to church, one thing you might learn is that dating is really simple in church life, and there's no complexity involved at all, and it's just well easy. I'm joking. It's a bit weird, dating in church. It involves friendships, and people might have been praying together, and then suddenly that might escalate. There's all kinds of different dynamics around dating in church. When we are brothers and sisters in Christ, that's weird. And then, what are some top level tips in navigating dating?
Can I say straight away, one of the things we feel passionate about, there is no the one out there for you. Yeah. It's not that you are on a search for the one, which honestly, I think again is another myth out. I don't know whether it's in just church circles or whether it's Hollywood again or whatever, that if I find my soulmate, then that will be okay. That is not the way it is. And you go on from there because you're better at it than me.
What, better at dating? No, better.
Better at explaining it.
No, explaining. You know, dating is really important. It's really significant. This is how, and dating is simply exploring, is this a person or the person that I want to get married to? And are we going to make a commitment? And that is a process. God doesn't just drop down a message from the sky. You have to take time.
Lads, I know you've used that one before. He doesn't do it.
You have to take time to get to know each other, spend time going out and so on. And that will always be a risk, because it may not work out. One of you or both of you may decide, no, I don't think this is going to work, and you decide not to become a sort of exclusive item again. So dating, it requires a risk. Intimate relationships, close relationships always require a risk. I was talking earlier about we have to start exposing part of ourselves. We have to be vulnerable with each other. And I remember somebody saying years ago that if the government is going to, this may seem a really strange analogy, but hear me out. If the government is going to encourage businesses to start, it has to make it easy for businesses to fail. Because people won't start running a business if they can't wind it up. And we have to be in a situation where we're able to start exploring dating, but if it doesn't work out, know how we bring it to a close. And within a Christian context, we also need to have boundaries. And this is, when Sila talked about a lot changed, we didn't have any boundaries. So within, 6 months or less than that, we started sleeping together. And it was when we became Christians, we were, actually nobody had said this to us, but we just sort of knew, it was the Holy Spirit talking to us, that really sex should be kept for marriage.
For that, exactly what we were describing earlier, the safety and the security of the vows we make when we commit ourselves to another person in marriage, to be faithful and honor them. till death us do part. That is the true context for the ultimate giving of ourselves, because that is what making love is. The giving of ourselves sexually to someone is the most precious gift that God has given to us that we can give to another person. And we need to think very carefully about giving that away outside of the context of
And I
marriage.
think we came to realize, God's not a spoil sport. He's not trying to spoil our fun, but he wants us. He wants to protect us. And if you sleep together and then you break up, we've seen it again and again and again talking to people. There is pain, there is hurt. And I remember somebody in London.
But can we also say that if you have and you are now not together with that person, there is also an amazing grace for healing and for restoration.
I remember somebody in London, a single woman who she went out with a guy, and they went out for some time, but it didn't work out. But within a sort of Christian understanding, they had really clear boundaries. They weren't going to sleep together if they weren't, unless they got married. And she said that what she wanted to be able to say to this person's future wife, because it wasn't her, they did break up, was to say, I looked after him for you. And for him to be able to say to her future husband, because she did eventually get married to somebody else, I looked after her for you. And I think dating within those boundaries, where there's a clear understanding, we're going to follow what the Bible teaches us actually about keeping sex for marriage, having boundaries, but taking those risks, exploring together. And then that's how we see if it works out.
And I think, as Nicky alluded to earlier, when you do recognize that actually this is not the person that you will spend the rest of your life with, that it's not going to work out, to end it well. And often it's out of like, oh, I don't want to hurt the person. I don't want to hurt the person by saying, I don't think this is right. That we do nothing and we kind of just blank them. And then the hurt is really deep. Actually, what we would say is be very clear. Don't do it with a text. No, sorry, don't want to get together anymore. I mean, you have to have courage to say, let's meet up, and to talk and to communicate that, in a kind way, that you think this is not right to continue as an exclusive relationship. And then you have to be really practical, because you cannot go, for the person who is not feeling that, it is very, very difficult to be in the same close proximity with someone who has told you that, and then you just kind of have to pretend like it's all fine. That is difficult. And we would say, if you're in a small group together, or if you're, coming to the same service together and seeing each other all the time, that is too difficult. It takes time for those relationships to heal and to be able to be just friendships again. And we know from our own kids and different people they went out with, they're now able to be good friends with people. They are good friends with people who, they have been out with but didn't marry in the end. And I would encourage you, be good at that. Have a kind of etiquette and an understanding between you as a community that you're going to do it well.
So we've talked about lots of things. We talked about marriage, we talked a bit about dating, but just finally, there will be people here, people at part of Penny Lane who are single. Some people might feel called to singleness. We know that is a thing, that it speaks about it in the Bible, but also there will be people who are single, maybe not out of choice or not out of calling, but find themselves in that position, who maybe find that really difficult, especially in the context of church, where it can feel like often marriage and relationships are really centralized. And so do you have any advice or any wisdom for people who are in that season of life and finding that difficult?
I think the first thing I'd want to say to that is, in the New Testament, in the Bible, marriage and singleness are valued equally. It is not that married people are more important than single, or single more important to marriage. Both are upheld as being good in themselves. And one of the things I love about a church community like this is it's made up of single and married people. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us as a Christian church community to be supporting each other in that. And through our marriage, not actually when we were very first married, but when we started having children, and probably 7, 8 years in, we started having a single person living with us. And then for the last, for 30 years or something, we always had somebody, a single person, living with us. And they were a great blessing to our family life. They supported us in our marriage, in our family life, with our children. But they also appreciated the opportunity to be in a home, because it'll be in Liverpool as in London. There's a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolated people. So to be in a family, in a home, was good for them too.
And I want to say this message. I mean, Nicky has said it already about, God values both singleness and marriage. But I want to say that. Oh, it's gone completely
I'll say
out
something
of
and
my
you'll
head.
think about it. You'll come back to
No. Oh,
what I
gosh.
think is really significant today in our society. Our society tends to reject marriage or undervalue marriage. Let me put it like that, as we were talking about at the beginning. Doesn't see it as so significant. But it also rejects singleness, thinks of singleness as a sort of sad, lonely state. And actually it's so, and sort of goes for something in between, a series of sort of semi-committed relationships. And I think it's not God's way, and it's not the best way for any of us. And therefore, I think to have this understanding that marriage and singleness are both good, and we support each other, is the
I've
better way.
remembered. So what I was going to say was that none of us need to be married in order to be fulfilled. That is not how God made us. I mean, Jesus himself was not married. Many other people in the Bible not married and lived fulfilled lives. What we all need as human beings, is friendship and community. And actually, that is sort of beautifully seen in a church community. That's what we should be practicing, what we should be modeling, what we should be doing, is building friendships, building community. And within that context, both married and single can thrive. And we have really a number of single, and I'm thinking, well, both men and women actually are. We have 4 kids, and 3 of them got married quite young. One of our sons only just got married last year, and he was 39. So he's been single a long time and longing to be married. But
And he's a gorgeous man. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's charming, funny.
Yeah, but, he just knew he hadn't met the right person. And so he hung in there. But, it gave him this amazing freedom to do stuff that if you are married, and perhaps if you have kids, if you're married, you have a responsibility to each other, your marriage, to your children. And that restricts you in some ways. With Barney, he did not have that. He was able to do stuff that his other siblings couldn't do. And that is a great thing. And we know single men and women. And I mean, I'm thinking of one woman now who's older than us. She is leading such an amazingly fruitful and fulfilled life. And I can tell you, at any get-together, she is the life and soul of the party. And she lives for what God's purposes and plans are for her. She has fabulous friends. She has an amazing family who have adopted her in Asia, and she travels a lot with her work. And I mean, that family has 7 kids, and they literally, she knows them all, loves them all. They're like her family. And there is such potential in either a single situation or a married situation to do what God's purpose for us.
I'd love you to pray for us in just a minute. If you guys want to find out more about what Nicky and Sila think about marriage, they distilled it into a book. When did you write this book?
We wrote it in, I think, 2000. is
Okay,
when
so
it
I
came
read
out.
it in 2008, 2 years before
Okay.
I got married. And then we did the pre-marriage course with these guys in London 14 years or 15 years ago now. And there's some great wisdom. Even if you're considering marriage or you just want to get a kind of an idea on what a Christian idea of marriage is, we've got a few copies at the back for a tenner, or you can get it off Amazon.
You can actually cover it in brown paper, and then no one knows you're reading a book about marriage.
Yeah, right. And we also have the marriage and pre-marriage course. Laura, why don't you talk a little bit about that before?
Yeah, so we've, on Tuesday this week, we've got the marriage and pre-marriage course starting in here at church at 7:30. And if you haven't heard about that until today, or you had no idea that that was even a thing, it is basically like the best date night. So like we set it up, you have a table just for you and your partner or your spouse if you're doing the marriage course, and you watch a video of these guys and they give you some content to talk about. It could be conflict, it could be something else, and then you have some time just with your partner to speak about that, to chat through some questions. It is not like a group activity. No one's asking you to confess all of your sins to a table of people. It's just you and the person that you came with. And we also, well, I personally, because I'm doing it this time, will cook you a wonderful meal so you eat together, you have dessert and coffee and all that stuff. And it is just a time to invest in your relationship, whether you're married or whether you're thinking about marriage or you're engaged. All of those stages, it is brilliant for. And it's just time, to take out and spend with your partner and invest.
And the pre-marriage course is 5 sessions, and the marriage course is 7 sessions. And the way that we do it is a month apart. So you've got a month to process, to think about it, to book babysitters for the next time if you've got kids. If you'd like to join us, then scan that QR code and just scroll to marriage, pre-marriage course and book on. It'd be lovely to see you there.